Hello, and welcome to today's Shorts Roundtable. I'm Paul Sloop, the Short Films Programming Manager for the Cleveland International Film Festival, or better known to most of you as the Shorts Guy. I want to take a moment here to offer special thanks to PNC for sponsoring our Filmmaker Conversations content throughout this year's festival. On today's roundtable, we'll be joined by filmmakers representing some of the short films included in Shorts Program 8. So with that in mind, allow me to welcome our guests to today's conversation. Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Welcome. Thank you.
To get us started, what I'd like to ask each of you to do is take a moment to just introduce yourself, your film, what you did on the film, and where you're calling in from today. Let's start with Dylan.
Hey guys, my name is Dylan Bruno. I was the writer, director, producer, and one of the lead actors in Thumb Runner. And I'm calling in today from sunny Southern California.
Wow, I've got 50% of that CV on my film. I just directed and produced my film, which is called A Mistake with the Chairs, and I'm calling in from London.
Hi everyone, I'm Molly Wexler. I directed and executive produced The Little Tea Shop, and I'm calling in from Memphis, Tennessee.
Well, again, thank you all for joining us. And to get this conversation started, what I'd like to ask each of you to share with the audience is what was the inspiration, what led to the making of the film, or why you in particular came to be involved in making the film? Dylan.
So my partner, Casper, is from Denmark, and he was in visiting, and he told me he had this great idea for an opening shot for something. And it was where this guy has a knife in his mouth, and he's sweating, and he's digging in the desert. And he pulls up this hand and he takes the knife out and he cuts the thumb off because he needs it to open up a cell phone. And I said, oh, that sounds really cool opening shot. Like what, where does it go from there? And he said, I have no idea. I just sort of thought of the shot. So we said, well, why don't we come up with an idea so we can go shoot it? And we spent that whole night kind of brainstorming. And then I spent the next day writing, and we came up with what's our first episode of Thumb Runner, which is a 10-episode series. And that's what we've shared with you guys. We shot it the next day, edited it the following day, and showed it to a bunch of people. And they said, wow, this is funny. Where does it go from here? So we ended up writing and shooting 9 more.
It's great. It's great. Thank you, Dylan. Al.
Absolutely.
Well, it's the first time I've stepped behind the camera, and I had worked with the writer Dave Kajganik on a series called The Terror for AMC, and we'd got on incredibly well, and I loved his writing. And when the opportunity came up to do a short, I went straight to Dave and said, "Would you?" And he said, "Of course I would." And then he said, "What do you want me to write?" And I said, "Well, I'll supply the landing strip. You write what you want to write." So it was a very kind of free form experience, really. And, Dave's a hugely busy writer, but, he wrote and we co-produced with Lambda, and it was rather kind of freeing, really. So as opposed to Dylan, who had an initial idea sort of presented to him that he ran with, I kind of opened up the book really and just said to Dave, "What do you want to write?" And he said, "Let me think about it." And then he came back to me and said, "I've got this idea." I said, "Write it, do it." And that's how the film basically came about.
Just great dialogue too. Great script. Thank you. Molly.
Well, The Little Tea Shop is actually a documentary, and it's the oldest restaurant in Memphis. And my father used to take me there. He worked downtown, and he would take me there as a kid. And I remember I didn't even like it because it was all these businessmen, and I felt sort of out of place. But, growing up and coming back to Memphis and as an adult, it just shocked me that this restaurant was still thriving, but it hadn't changed. All of downtown Memphis, like I think many cities around the world, had been revitalized, and there were, modern coffee shops and boutique stores and all this, but there was this old 100-year-old restaurant still serving Southern fare to sort of the who's who in Memphis. And so that intrigued me to explore deeper. And when I explored deeper, I found out many more interesting things besides just the fact that it was the oldest restaurant in Memphis.
It's a really great doc. Our entire team talked about how much it just made us smile and happy, to know that such a place still exists. So really great story to share. Thank you.
Thank
The
you.
next thing I'll ask you all to ponder is this. typically in the short film world, what I find is that sometimes the stories behind the films are just as interesting as the stories of what we see on the screen. So what I'd ask you to consider is if there was one thing you'd want our audience to know about the making of the film, or a story you'd like to share about the behind the scenes making of the film, what would that be? And please take the time to share that story. And Dylan, we'll start with you.
All right. Well, I mean, interestingly, following what Al said about just opening it up to sort of ideas to come, once we did this first episode of Thumb Runner, we sort of said, hey, I think we're onto something. It's fun. It's silly. We get some laughs out of it. And let's see if we can get some more people involved. So we opened up to all of our friends who are actors and writers and just said, hey, come up with an idea that fits into this general world and we'll find a way to make it work. And so we attracted a lot of great actors who came in and involved. My brother wrote an episode. Diane Farr, who was a friend of mine, came in and did some. My friend Matt O'Toole did something. And we just got these really great ideas for quirky, weird scenarios. And, it turned out that I guess a lot of my friends wanted to beat me up because a lot of these episodes just turned into people stuffing me into small spaces and punching me and kicking me. And, we just had a blast making this thing. And so to do 10 episodes where each one was sort of the genesis of it came from one of the collaborators who decided they wanted to become involved was a really freeing and fun and nimble filmmaking experience. So we wrote for things that we had access to. We had goats at the time, my wife and I, so the goats got written in. I had a boat, so it got written in that I was thrown off a moving boat really fast. And, so all these things happened. And again, we just had a blast with a team of collaborators kind of crowdsourcing all 10 episodes together. So fun experience.
Well, one of the things I'll say about, obviously we're playing episode 1 here, is that I've been doing this for a long time, 18 years of helping program the shorts here in Cleveland. And the thing we see probably most rare is action adventure stuff. It's just more difficult to shoot whatever. And you guys did such a great job.
Thank you.
Pulling that off. So it was one of the things that stuck out. I was like, wow, they definitely pulled this off. That's great.
Thank you.
Al, next to you.
I think on the one sense, the freedom to offer a writer a kind of a sort of an open book or a landing strip on which, it's very bold for a first-time filmmaker to turn around and just say, don't worry, I'll make it land. And then what does land in your inbox of the first draft of a script is essentially a 13-page scene involving 6 characters. Which is quite a tough thing to shoot, where everyone gets a fair kind of crack of the whip. So you've got 6 basically leading characters whose dialogue is obviously very important, but it's not only what they say, what they don't say, and making sure you kind of cover everybody in the time that you have. And so what I loved actually about it was the prep. I know that filmmaking, a lot of people will say it's all in the prep. And I did a lot of that and tried to figure out the most effective way of shooting that. And so that was kind of the biggest challenge. And once I'd sort of broken the back of it and worked out how I was going to do it, which is essentially to break that 13 pages of a 16-page script down into 6 separate scenes, which I shot in sort of sequential order, it sort of made my life much easier. But the thing I really loved about it was that I lived and died with every take. I expended so much energy living and breathing with these actors, and I loved observing. Being an actor myself, I loved observing. I could see what was going on. I really enjoyed observing actors and having to find a way to kind of. Sometimes they got blocked and they couldn't see their way through it. And so that kind of intimacy between an actor, first-time director, and very young actors as well. These young people, it's most of them is first time they've been in front of a camera too. And I have to say they were extraordinary and they were very natural. But I set myself a huge challenge, but I love the fact that Dave set that for me. You have to be ambitious, and that, as a creative endeavor, it felt like that, and that was really huge, terrifying, and fun.
I thought one of the things in your film that was done very well is that in a script that was definitely dialogue driven, there was a good blend of show me instead of tell me, which is challenging when you're going to be dialogue driven, is that you end up trying to say too much with dialogue. It was a great blend for something that needed to be dialogue driven. So very well done.
Thank you. We also, just as a brief addendum, we shot just before COVID hit, and so rather than, and I was actually going to edit it in Los Angeles, where Dave was at the time, and Greg, the editor, and of course that became impossible. So everything subsequently in post production was done remotely. So I'm very much looking forward to being in the same room as all of you one day, I hope too.
Cannot wait. Cannot wait. Molly, to you.
So when we started to make the story, the premise really was that if the walls could talk, so much history. And I felt like so many deals that changed the course of the city had been made in this restaurant. So that was really our premise going in. But as we explored further, we really got to know the owner, Suhair Lak, who's a Palestinian immigrant. And she has been the owner for 40 years. And it just really became her story, and how remarkable that this woman who isn't from the South, isn't even from the United States, could create this community where all people felt welcomed, yet still kept that Southern charm, and, kept an atmosphere where people felt so comfortable there, and sort of like all, all things that people felt about each other were left at the door, all negative feelings. It's a very positive environment. But one thing that we couldn't include in the film that I hope someday I can do something with is that in exploring this story, I found out that apparently, and I find this hard to believe, but apparently the restaurant was sort of always naturally integrated. When I did all the research and talked to people, when did this restaurant become integrated? Everyone said, well, it was always integrated. People were always welcome there, which of course, if you know any history of the South or Memphis, that is not the case. And so right after Dr. King was shot in Memphis, there was a group of Black citizens and white citizens that needed a place to meet. They needed to bring healing. They needed to bring the city together. And instead of meeting in a government office building or someone's office boardroom or something, the tea shop was chosen. And believe it or not, there were still a few gentlemen alive. Unfortunately, one of them has passed since we did the filming, who were part of these meetings that helped reconcile sort of the future of Memphis and get over the garbage bin strike and get over the shooting. I mean, as terrible and tragic as Dr. King's shooting was for the country and really the world, it was especially tragic in Memphis because the whole city was just devastated and divided. So over a course of years, there were meetings that took place, regularly at the tea shop. And of course, this is a very important part of the history of the restaurant, but ultimately with the way we decided to take the film, we couldn't include that footage. And so that's something that the audience won't see, but I hope at some point we can figure out a way to tell that part of the story.
Great, great. One of the things I thought about your film, and we talked about as a programming team, was that in a normal year, this film playing on the circuit would have a lot of people going to visit this little tea shop. And maybe the timing is going to end up being just fine, because as the vaccinations continue to roll out, we're all going to get a chance to visit. So thank you for that. I would like to ask you all one more question before we go, and that is maybe share with us what might be up next for each of you as artists and filmmakers. Dylan?
So every time I do these, I always feel like I'm the guy with the quirky, wacky, silly film, and I get surrounded by these like really serious filmmakers, and I always feel somewhat a little out of place sometimes with that. So my next project is, it's still a comedy, but it's a very dark comedy. And really what it is it's an exploration of an aging man who's realized that he thinks he's past his window to have created a legacy, and sort of his last opportunity to build one before he goes. So I look forward to hopefully being able to join the ranks of serious filmmakers someday.
Al?
Well, as a producer, my fledgling company, we are our first show is going out to all the broadcasters in the US in about 3 weeks' time. We have an amazing director attached to that, which is great. But as a director, I want to work with Dave again. I'm hoping to do another short later on this year, which I've asked Dave to write, and he very kindly said he would. But my kind of goal is there's a novel I want to make into a film. I don't have the rights to it yet. I've just made an initial inquiry, but it's one of those novels that I've said to about 5 people, all of whom have said, "What a brilliant premise! I have no idea how this is going to work." And I rather like that idea. So it's a big challenge ahead, but it just, as a very wise person said to me in the industry, said, if it's an idea that you just can't shake off, then you might be onto something. So that's a slightly longer term goal, but I've loved the experience, and I'm so looking forward to doing more.
We'll hope to get to see that. Great. Molly.
I co-directed The Tea Shop with a man named Matteo Cervente, and it was produced by Joseph Carr. And so the three of us have been meeting over this entire year of quarantine, brainstorming a bunch of ideas. And thankfully, some of them seem to be at least moving forward. So one of them is going to be another documentary, I think this time a feature on the Memphis riverfront. And there's about to be a $60 million renovation of the riverfront. But we're going to go sort of deep into the history of that and what the future holds for it. But also, actually, Dylan, we're looking into something episodic based on, there's a bar here in town that's got a really interesting and sordid history, the building itself and the bar. And that just got us thinking more creatively. So that would be the first project I would have done that's not a documentary. So we're actually applying to Sundance's, one of their labs to see if we can get in to help, bring this more to fruition.
Very
Great.
cool.
Well, we'll be looking forward to seeing what you all do next. And again, on behalf of everyone here at the festival, thank you so very much for joining us for today's conversation.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you so much for having us, Paul. Really appreciate it.
And in addition to our filmmakers, we have to thank you, our audience, for joining us for today's Shorts Roundtable. We would not be here without your ongoing support to help us bring film home. We hope you'll consider supporting our challenge match again this year, presented by Cuyahoga Arts and Culture, to support the future of our festival. Our goal this year is to reach $145,000, and we are so grateful in advance for any amount you're able to contribute. To make a donation, or to purchase tickets, or to check out our full schedule of filmmaker conversations, please visit us at clevelandfilm.org. With that, please stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll look forward to seeing you back here again very soon.